style is, I would say, it's universal because it's pop, it's R&B, it's rock, it's soul. I mean, it's all of that combined on one album.
They had a platinum debut, chart-topping singles, a cosign from Left Eye, and then silence. No scandal, no public fallout, just gone.
Just to finally get back on stage, it meant more than I can even express right now.
Behind the scenes, Blaque wasn't failing. They were being sabotaged. Shelved albums, leaked tracks, canceled tours. Everything they built was systematically destroyed, not by accident, but by design. And if you follow the paper trail far enough, you start seeing a familiar name.
Music is unique, music is special, music has a very individual, meaningful role in society, not only to youth.
Clive Davis, the man behind legends, the architect of careers, and according to insiders, the one who pulled the plug on Blaque when they became too black, too bold, and too expensive to control. This isn't just a story about music, it's about power, silence, and how the industry treats black women it no longer finds profitable. What Clive Davis did to R&B group Blaque is truly heartbreaking. Long before the industry turned its back on them, Blaque was the future of R&B. The group, whose name stood for believing in life and achieving a quest for unity in everything, was crafted with vision, raw talent, and undeniable star power. It all started in Atlanta, where Natina Reed and Shamari Fears met in elementary school after their families relocated from New York City and Detroit. Both girls had a passion for music and performance from a young age. Shamari was already performing with a group called Intrigue, while Natina was laying the foundation for what would eventually become Blaque. The third piece of the puzzle came together when Shamari was introduced to Brandy Williams at a talent show. After Shamari left Intrigue, she joined Natina, and together they invited Brandy to complete the trio. Their chemistry was instant. They initially called themselves Black Ivory, but were forced to change the name due to copyright issues. That's how they landed on Blaque. Their big break came when Natina crossed paths with Ronald Lopez, the brother of TLC's Lisa Left Eye Lopez.
We were actually Ronald Lopez's group first, which is
Left Eye's brother.
Yes, and he had a partner. They had a production house called Black House, and we were the first group off of Black House.
Nice.
And so they were like, "You're the first group. Let's name you guys Blaque." And we were like, "Okay." And
Ronald introduced Natina to his sister, and Left Eye immediately saw something special in them. Under her guidance, Blaque signed to Left Eye Productions, and it wasn't long before Columbia Records came calling. With Left Eye's mentorship and Columbia's major backing, Blaque had everything they needed to explode onto the mainstream. Their first taste of the spotlight came in 1997 when they appeared in Lil' Kim's Not Tonight, Ladies' Night Remix, music video alongside Missy Elliott, Da Brat, and Angie Martinez. But it wasn't until 1999 that they made their full debut with the self-titled album Blaque. It was a commercial success, going platinum thanks to standout singles like 808 and Bring It All to Me. Bring It All to Me, featuring JC Chases of NSYNC, climbed to #1, 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. Their look, their sound, and their energy were all reminiscent of TLC, but with a fresher, more futuristic vibe. Left Eye's influence was unmistakable, especially in their edgy fashion and futuristic visuals. In the summer of 1999, Blaque joined NSYNC on tour, followed by a coveted spot on TLC's Fan Mail tour. By 2000, they had made the leap into acting with a role in the hit teen comedy Bring It On, where they played the East Compton Clovers cheerleaders. Their contribution to the soundtrack with the track As If further cemented their place in early 2000s pop culture. They weren't just riding a wave, they were helping create it. Blaque was executive producing their own material, and they had earned creative control over their second album, Blackout. They weren't just a product of the machine, they were artists with a vision. But that's exactly when everything started to unravel. According to former insiders and leaked accounts, Columbia Records suddenly shelved Blackout right before its scheduled release in 2001. The lead single, Can't Get It Back, had a full music video ready to go, and it never aired. The album, which the group had poured their hearts into, was abruptly scrapped in the US and quietly released only in Japan. Years later, it would resurface on iTunes with no fanfare and no promotional push. It was a brutal betrayal. To many, it didn't make sense. Why would Columbia halt the momentum of a group that had just gone platinum? Why sabotage a sophomore album that had every chance to cement their status as R&B royalty? The answer, many believe, is buried beneath layers of corporate politics, and possibly in Clive Davis's strategic vision of what the music industry should look like. To the public, Blaque's sudden disappearance looked like just another girl group fading out, but those close to the situation knew the truth. Blackout wasn't shelved because it wasn't good. It was shelved because it wasn't convenient. The shelving of Blackout was not an accident. It was an intentional, calculated decision by Columbia Records, and insiders believe it was orchestrated from the top. According to multiple sources, label executives considered the group too expensive and not marketable enough in the shifting pop climate. In a time when labels were scrambling to push more crossover-friendly acts, Blaque's Afrocentric aesthetic, urban edge, and unapologetic Black identity didn't fit the mold. Instead of supporting them, Columbia chose to suppress them. Behind the scenes, the members of Blaque were devastated. They had executive produced the album, poured themselves into the writing and creative process, and were ready to show the world their evolution. But the music they created was buried. To make matters worse, Columbia didn't just shelve the album, they sabotaged it. The rollout was cut short. Promotion was stopped dead in its tracks. The music video for Can't Get It Back was shelved despite already being filmed. No tour, no press, no explanation. This wasn't just a career stall, it was career starvation. The group was left watching in silence as their momentum vanished. According to the members, Columbia refused to even return calls about next steps. The message was loud and clear. Blaque had been iced out. Rumors began circulating that the label had deliberately leaked tracks from Blackout to kill any chance of an official release gaining traction. It wasn't unheard of. Leaks were often used as smokescreens by labels to dilute excitement or shift blame. Once the music was out unofficially, the label could point to piracy or lack of interest as an excuse for not promoting the project. But the damage went even deeper. As Blaque waited in limbo, they were starved of radio support, retail shelf space, and even basic label communications. Industry insiders now say the group was being blackballed. Quietly but effectively, Columbia was erasing Blaque from the mainstream. It was a tactic often used when labels wanted to dispose of artists without public backlash, deny access to media, block collaborations, and quietly let them fade. It worked. One by one, opportunities dried up. By the time they tried to pivot and signed with Elektra Records, the buzz had already vanished. And even then, their next album, Torch, was also shelved. Another blow that confirmed what many fans had started to suspect. Blaque wasn't being mismanaged. They were being buried. Some blamed the group's attitude or image, suggesting they were difficult to market or too confrontational behind the scenes. But when you dig deeper, those critiques start to sound like coded language, the kind often used to justify sidelining strong, creative Black women who refused to be controlled. The environment Blaque was forced to endure didn't just hurt their career, it broke their unity. With no label support and mounting pressure, the group started to fracture. Natina Reed, who had been the group's most outspoken member, eventually left to pursue ministry. Brandy Williams focused on solo work, including features like her hook on Nelly's hit Grills. Shamari tried to reboot her career with Darkchild Records, but nothing ever felt quite right again. Fans were left confused and heartbroken. How could a group with this much potential, this much talent, just vanish? And while the public never got official answers, industry whispers started pointing in one direction: Clive Davis. Clive Davis was never just another executive. He was the kingmaker, a music mogul with the power to build superstars or break careers.
I was the lawyer for Columbia Records, and all of a sudden my boss, so to speak, was being made a group president.
Under his leadership, Columbia Records minted legends. But that influence also came with a darker side, and for Blake, it may have been fatal. Though Davis wasn't always publicly tied to the decisions surrounding Blaque, insiders believe his hand was everywhere. The shelving of Blaque out, the abrupt withdrawal of promotion, and the blackballing that followed all lined up with industry tactics Davis had been known to use before. Former employees described him as ruthlessly strategic, someone who would support artists only as long as they fit his vision. And if they didn't, he knew exactly how to push them aside without leaving fingerprints. According to industry whispers, Clive Davis wasn't sold on Blaque's sound or image. He allegedly felt they were too urban, too loud, too unfiltered, traits that made them risky investments in a market shifting toward more sanitized, pop-friendly acts. Some believe that's why their second album never saw the light of day in the US. Davis, they say, didn't see Blaque as a long-term brand. He saw them as a phase. What makes this even more damning is the pattern. Davis was rumored to have favored artists who were more commercially palatable, often lighter-skinned women, or those who played into a softer, more agreeable persona. Blaque, on the other hand, was bold. They pushed boundaries in their fashion, their lyrics, and their creative choices. And that may have put them on the wrong side of his agenda. The group reportedly clashed with Davis's team over creative direction, especially when it came to Blaque Out. They wanted more control. They had earned it. But the pushback was intense. Sources claim Davis didn't support their artistic growth and instead saw it as defiance. From that point forward, the label's interest in them dwindled. Fast. In some circles, the story goes even further. Former radio programmers and producers have hinted that Davis may have actively suppressed Blaque's access to the industry pipeline. According to them, deals were quietly squashed, radio play was discouraged, and press interest was redirected, all without any formal statements. Just silence. The tactic worked. With each new obstacle, Blaque became less visible, less supported, and more exhausted. The momentum they had built from a platinum debut was wasted, and Clive Davis, with his spotless public image, was never questioned. But behind closed doors, the damage was done. The manipulation, the favoritism, the systematic erasure. It wasn't just about one group. It was about a pattern in the industry. Blaque had become another cautionary tale. What happens to Black female artists who won't bend to the machine? Still, fans held on. There were rumors of a reunion, whispered hopes of unreleased tracks. But any dreams of a full comeback came crashing down in 2012 with one tragic phone call. By 2012, Blaque had already been through every kind of industry betrayal imaginable. Albums shelved, tours canceled, careers frozen. But what came next wasn't a corporate decision. It was a tragedy that shook the entire R&B community. On October 26, 2012, just 2 days before her 32nd birthday, Natina Reed was struck by a car near Atlanta while crossing a dimly lit street. The accident happened so suddenly, so quietly, that the news took even the most diehard fans by surprise. Natina had always been the loudest voice in Blaque, the lyricist, the energy, the heartbeat. Then, just like that, she was gone.
They said to me, "You haven't heard?" And I said, "Heard what?" And it said, "Mom, Natina's dead."
The details of her death were as murky as the industry history that preceded it. Police found no drugs or alcohol in her system, and the driver of the vehicle was not charged. But what caught public attention was something else entirely. The address listed on the incident report. It was an extended stay motel, the kind often associated with people between homes. The press quickly began speculating that Natina was homeless at the time of her death. Her mother denied the claims, insisting Natina was simply in transition and preparing to move into a new home. But the image had already been painted of a once famous artist now left behind, forgotten, vulnerable. Even more heartbreaking was the detail that Natina's 10-year-old son had been in the custody of her ex, rapper Corrupt, for several years prior. Fans were forced to confront a cruel possibility that Natina, the woman who helped shape a platinum-selling group, had died, isolated, and unsupported. And what did the industry do? Very little. There were no award show tributes, no major radio segments, no music video marathons. Outside of a few blogs and R&B niche platforms, the media barely acknowledged her passing. It was a sobering reminder of how quickly the industry forgets, how quickly it erases Black women who no longer serve a purpose on a chart or a red carpet. For those who remembered Blaque's Shelved albums, Natina's death reopened old wounds. It wasn't just about her being gone, it was about what had been done to her, to all of them. The career sabotage, the creative suppression, the silence. Fans began to see Natina not just as a casualty of a car accident, but as a victim of an industry that chewed her up and left her alone in the dark. The group's hopes for a full reunion were shattered. Shamari and Brandy had tried to bring Blaque back together more than once. Most recently, in 2012, after a performance at the Left Eye Music Festival. The reunion had sparked something in them. They'd started working on new music, signed to new management, and even revisited reality television projects. There was a new album in the works.
When they came back together, boy, the bond was so strong. Nothing was going to separate these three girls.
But all of that died with Natina. Her death made it clear, the Blaque that fans knew and loved was never coming back. There would be no trio, no closure, no final album with all three voices. Just memories and questions. Questions about why the group was neglected for so long, why they were never protected, and why a woman as talented as Natina Reed had to die before people cared again. After Natina Reed's tragic death, the reality hit hard. Blaque's story would never have a happy ending. But the group's remaining members, Brandy Williams and Shamari Fears, didn't stop fighting. In the years that followed, they tried to keep the legacy alive. But it wasn't easy, and the ghosts of what Blaque could have been never stopped haunting them. In the wake of the tragedy, the group's fans rallied. They started a petition demanding the release of Torch, Blaque's long-lost third album. But there was a major obstacle. Rights to the project were owned by Matthew Knowles, the group's former manager, and father of Beyoncé. Even though Knowles had long since moved on to other ventures, his control over Blaque's catalog stood in the way of closure. Finally, in 2019, fans got what they'd been asking for. On the 20th anniversary of Blaque's debut album, Torch was released on all digital platforms. For longtime supporters, it was both a celebration and a painful reminder of what had been stolen. The album quickly shot up to number 3 on iTunes, proving that the love for Blaque had never really disappeared. It had just been ignored. Brandy and Shamari did what they could to keep pushing forward. Brandy dabbled in solo work and even appeared on Nelly's chart-topping hit Grills. Shamari signed with Darkchild Records, attempted her own solo project, and eventually pivoted into reality television, joining The Real Housewives of Atlanta for its 11th season. She and husband Ronnie DeVoe of New Edition also released music together, trying to keep the spirit of creativity alive. But even these individual successes couldn't fully shake the group's lingering sadness. Every interview, every performance, every memory was stained with the injustice of how Blaque had been treated, and how the industry had failed them. Scandal, though rare in their history, didn't spare them completely. Around the time Torch finally dropped, Brandy found herself caught up in controversy. She had reportedly cheated on her fiancé with her best friend's ex, jazz singer Tony Hightower. The drama made headlines and led to a sudden breakup. In an interview, Brandy bluntly declared herself single and even expressed interest in joining The Bachelorette. For some fans, it was jarring, but for others, it was just another sign of how deeply the industry's betrayal had affected them all, forcing them to rebuild themselves on uneven ground in full view of the public. Meanwhile, questions still lingered around Natina's final years. Had she been struggling financially? Had the industry's abandonment pushed her to the margins of society? Reports that she had been living in an extended-stay motel and lost custody of her son only fueled the speculation and the outrage. Her mother insisted she was fine, just in transition. But the damage was done. The public saw what they were meant to ignore: a young Black woman, immensely talented, who had been discarded by the very system she once fueled. Despite it all, the remaining members of Blaque have continued to speak lovingly of their time together. They honor Natina's memory in interviews and social media posts, but the pain is still visible in their eyes, in their voices, and in the long silences that sometimes follow their answers. What Blaque went through wasn't just mismanagement. It wasn't bad luck. It was a brutal example of how the music industry can manufacture success and then erase it when it no longer serves its purpose. An example of how Black women can be praised for their talent, only to be punished for their ambition. And the man whose name keeps surfacing in the middle of it all? Clive Davis. Clive Davis is often remembered as the visionary who built stars: Whitney Houston, Alicia Keys, Barry Manilow. But beneath the success stories lies a shadow few are willing to talk about. And for Blaque, that shadow was devastating. While Davis wasn't the day-to-day manager of Blaque, Columbia Records was his empire during their most critical years. According to multiple insiders, it was Davis's overarching influence, his decisions on who got the label's full support and who didn't, that determined the group's fate. Davis has long been accused of playing favorites, especially with artists who fit his specific mold: palatable, controllable, and marketable to white audiences. Blaque, with their bold sound, Black-centric identity, and Left Eye's creative backing, never stood a chance. The group's second album, Blake Out, was reportedly shelved because Davis didn't see it fitting into the sanitized commercial space he wanted to dominate in the early 2000s. Rumors swirled that he personally ordered the project buried, not because it lacked quality, but because it lacked obedience. That was the pattern. If you challenged the machine, you were erased. Even more disturbing are the whispers of Davis's behind-the-scenes tactics. Former music executives and radio programmers have alleged that Davis used his relationships to quietly blacklist acts like Blaque, pulling airplay, freezing press, and rerouting resources to other artists. This kind of strategic silencing didn't leave fingerprints, but the results were crystal clear. No visibility, no sales, no future. And when tragedy struck, when Natina Reed died under tragic and murky circumstances, there was no statement from Davis, no tribute, no industry push to honor her legacy, just silence. This isn't new. The music industry has a long history of using Black women, discarding them, and erasing the evidence. But Blaque's story is especially cruel because they had it all: the talent, the numbers, the backing. What they didn't have was protection. Once Lisa Left Eye Lopez passed away, Blaque lost their most powerful advocate. And with no one left to shield them, the machine did what it always does. It consumed and moved on. Today, Clive Davis still enjoys glowing profiles and star-studded tributes. But for every Whitney or Alicia, there's a Blaque, a group that deserved better but was sacrificed for someone else's plan. And the industry would rather you forget them, but fans haven't. Not really. The success of Torch in 2019, the resurgence of interest in their old videos, and the continued respect shown to Natina online all prove that Blaque's legacy still matters. They're more than a footnote in Y2K nostalgia. They're a warning. A mirror held up to the music industry's darkest truths. If the story of Blaque teaches us anything, it's this: talent isn't always enough. Sometimes the very system meant to elevate you is the one that decides how and when you disappear. And in Blaque's case, that decision may have come from the very top. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.